Hi, I'm Sandi Genovese, and today we're making a project that I'm calling Letters from the Heart. You know, can you imagine what it would be like as an adult if you were given a little scrapbook like this that had letters in it from your mom or your grandmother or your aunt or uncle or grandpa, and it had these letters that they would write and save that you would open as an adult, and they could be their thoughts on anything. It could be one of their favorite moments, a whole list of their favorite moments with you. One of the things they found special about you at age 5, maybe age 6. Something special for your wedding day. When my niece got pregnant with her first one, there was a really special way that she shared with me that she was pregnant. She put a little peanut in a box, and along with a sonogram, and when I opened it, it said, you know, the baby is about this size right now, and Addison's nickname forevermore has become Peanut. It'd be fun to write that story in here to share with her, that she can read later. So this is a way of putting all these personal thoughts just into this fun scrapbook. Now the envelopes are thinner scrapbook paper because they fold, and so it's kind of nice for it not to be super thick, but that means you need a nice sturdy chipboard for the base to support everything, to keep it all nice. And so we're going to look first at making the front and the back cover. Now, as I said, the back cover is this nice sturdy chipboard. And on the chance that there might be photos in there, I'm going to be sure and use acid-free paper as well. So I started with chipboard that was 4 by 8, and then I cut a piece of plain colored paper that just gives me a nice, I don't know, about 1.5 inches border all the way around. It's not so critical, but you're going to put adhesive solid on this, lay this down, and then before you pull the corners up, it's easiest before you pull all these sides up to cut these notches or corners out. And I started one just to save a little bit of time so you can see how that looks. So here I've already glued the chipboard down, and I have even my adhesive, but you can see I've cut out these corner notches. And now it's just a question of folding over what will be the back of this cool little mini book that's going to hold Letters from the Heart. The reason I don't worry about the dimension of this background paper is because I'm going to go back now with pattern paper that goes with the envelopes that I've selected, and I'm going to go ahead and place that right over the top. So let me add my adhesive to this paper. I know I say this every time, but you can put more adhesive than that. That's enough for me to show you how to build it. So this is just about the same size. Sometimes there might just be a tiny little edge. Sometimes that little contrasting solid color with the pattern color is sort of a neat thing. This becomes the back. We are going to need to punch holes in it, but I'm going to wait until I get the holes in the cover, the front cover, and then I can make sure that I punch them and they match together. So I'm going to put this aside, and let's look at the front cover. You can see here that I've added some decoration. So once again, the dimensions are 4 by 8. And what I did is I came in about 1 1/8 inches, and then I did just a score line because the front cover, as you can see, is going to need to open and close. So I've got my score line there. I'm going to go ahead and fold on that score line, and I'm going to add just various decoration. So I'll bring up some of the parts and pieces that I'm going to use. So if I just put adhesive, this is going to be a check border, and I'm going to trail this around to the other side. So I'll start by putting my adhesive on this, and I'll go all the way to the end, because instead of trimming it to fit to size, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, in fact, you know what? I think it's a little easy to tell if it's straight by looking at those check marks. So it looks, that's about straight. And you know, it doesn't need to be precise, but I'm going to pull it around to the other side. So I have this, and then I'm going to add some polka dot paper. All of these papers can be the remnants that are left from once you cut the envelopes out. And that way you can be repeating some of the same papers. This one is really not long enough to curl around, so this guy I'll go ahead and trim. And then I'll lay down more patterned papers. There's a little trick here because I'm laying this yellow dot paper on yellow in order for it to show. I've set it down, and with an orange marker I've just traced a little key line. If I just butt my marker right against the edge, in fact we don't need it on this edge, but let me show you. I'm going to just go right to this edge, and when I pull this up, you'll see that it just gives me that little edge of orange, which helps it to really stand out. So I'll go ahead and add this, just tuck it against that. I'm going to put some adhesive behind the green that I've created, what looks sort of like a banner, and I can see that I'm going to want to tuck this underneath here because I didn't think to trim this. So in order to have this not stick out too far, I'm going to place this under this one. And then, you know, because these are meant to be letters, I use stamps in my art all the time. I always ask when I go in to mail anything, what picture stamps do you have? And I use them. So I'm going to use this heart that spells out the word forever. It just seems really appropriate. And I'm going to add this to this design so that I can overlap a few elements here. And then to really make it look like it's been through the mail, if you don't have one of these, I use mine all the time. I'm going to use a rubber stamp to look like this has been canceled. So I'm going to go ahead and ink it. And the beauty, a stamp from the post office never is perfect, so you don't have to worry about this being perfect either. It will just look that much more authentic if it's not perfect. So I'll go ahead, stamp that down. The only thing is, whatever kind of paper, it's shiny paper of some sort that they use on the stamp, it stays wet for like a day. Anytime I'm going to work with this now, I run the risk of, this will dry over here fast, but this part on the stamp, honestly, it almost takes 24 hours to dry. So what I do is I take a sticky note and I stick it right over the top while I'm working on it, so I'm not smearing it as I work. The other thing that I'm going to address later is the holes that we're going to need to bind this. So for right now, I'm going to put this with the back cover, and let's look now at the envelopes inside. Well, that's easy because I'm going to give you a pattern. So let me bring this and show you. Here's the pattern, and if your envelope prints out, every copy machine's a little different. If yours is a little larger or a little smaller, adjust the size of your front and back cover to match. So print out your pattern. You can print it right on to colored copy paper, which is what I did here, or you can also print it onto lots of patterned scrapbook papers that have white on the back side. The thinner scrapbook paper, even though my copy machine does not take the heavy paper, it works fine with the lighter weight scrapbook paper. So you're going to go ahead and run it through, get all your papers patterned, colored, run through so you have your pattern, and then go ahead and cut around it, which I've already done here. And on the pattern, I've indicated the fold lines with dashes. So you're going to lay the ruler down and go ahead and score on those 3 places where I've got a fold line indicated with a dotted line. So I'm going to go ahead and fold. Because I've already scored these, I can just follow my score marks, which I realize it's so light, you probably can't see it, but it really shows for me. So at this point, I want to make sure that it's straight. And it's really, what I'll do now is make sure that this clears. And if this is a little too long, you can trim it off. And notice here, when I go to put this together, I don't want this to snag and catch. So I can see that the way I folded it must not have been completely straight. I'm going to go back and just take a little sliver off of this edge so that it doesn't catch when you go through the book. So now that I can see the dotted line, I can see that's going to work. This I'm going to use as my pattern, and I've made one already, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Go ahead and run an extra piece of colored paper through. Use it as your pattern to know where you're going to punch the holes for the binding. So what I've done, and you can see I experimented with a couple of different size punches and a couple of different placement of holes. These are the ones that work the best. So since this on the pattern is 1 inch, what I did is I marked a 1/2 inch in and drew my pencil line a 1/2 inch. So it's exactly halfway, the middle line of this binding edge. Then I came in 3/4 of an inch, and with my 1/8 inch hole punch, I went ahead and I punched out each hole. Once you have this pattern, then use this to mark everything. So I'm going to use this to go ahead, lay this down, and with a pencil, I'm going to mark the holes in this first one. So I'll go ahead then with the 1/8 inch hole punch, and I'm going to punch out those holes. And I've already punched out all the rest. So I now have all of these ready to go. In order to place them in the front and back cover, I need holes in that as well. And I also need spacers. And let me show you why the need for the spacers. If I look at taking this front cover and I use brads to hold this shut, look at how this is tight and this is fat, and I haven't even added photos or any souvenirs or things that might go in these letters. So I need spacers to thicken this edge. So what I've done is I've cut the 4-inch length of my chipboard. I've cut foam, and it's just 1 inch wide, and I've done the same thing. I'm using the same pattern to punch the holes here. So I've already marked this using this pattern. It's not, the holes will punch, your hole punch will work just as well in foam as they do on paper, and we're going to see, because in a minute I'll go ahead and I'll punch the front and back cover out of the chipboard as well. So I've got 3 spacers that I use depending on how many envelopes you have and how many thicknesses you think you're going to be putting into those envelopes. You can put as many spacers as you need. Foam is something that's really easy to get at any craft store. It comes in 9 by 12 sheets, and you just trim it into the size you want. So before I can assemble though, I need to also, I've used the same guide to place holes for my front cover. So I'm going to go ahead, you can see I've marked them already with pencil. I'm going to punch these holes out. And then I'm going to go ahead and lay this down and use this to mark the back cover. So here are my holes. And the brad's probably going to cover it, but I'm going to erase this little bit of pencil that I can still see. You can see why it's important to have that sticky note on there. I would have just smeared some of the ink from my stamp. So now I'll go ahead and I'll punch through the chipboard of the back cover. So now that everything has hole punches, it's time to go ahead and assemble it. So place your envelopes in an order that looks good. And if you're going to write on the outside of the envelope what it's about, or like you might say, open this on your wedding day. You might have information about when you want it opened. You might have information about when you sealed it closed. I sealed this on your 5th birthday. That information you can put on it. I think it's maybe easiest while it's loose like this. But at some point, once you have all that ready, then you're going to go ahead and assemble. So I'm going to take and I'm going to place 1 spacer at the back, 1 spacer. I use 2 spacers at the front. So you do need brads that have really, let me set these down so you can really see, nice long stems on them, because this is fairly thick by the time I add all of these spacers. So I'm going to go ahead and place the first brad. A brad is probably the easiest way to bind anything, because you can do them individually. You don't need to line everything up, even though they would line up, and it would be faster if I did. Let me do a few groups. Let's see if I can get a few groups of these, and then do this, go through the final one. And even though they're not really lined up, it won't, I can straighten it out once I flip it over. So I'm going to go ahead, do this with my tweezers so my hands are out of the way, and pull over these. And I'm not going to worry about doing it super tight yet, because I'm still going to be adjusting and moving these as I do the next set. So here, now to go through the second set of holes. So I've gone through all of those holes. Before I tighten everything up, I'm going to adjust my spacers, make sure they're in there straight, and then flip this over and open up, kind of tweak everything so they look all nicely aligned, and then open up the prongs on the end of this brad. So before I flatten them out, I'm going to turn them so they face the same direction as the one up above. So you can see why you needed nice long brads with a really long tail. So now you have all of this, and if I pull this off, you can see, I'll try not to smear that, how you have all your envelopes inside just waiting for your special information that you want to share with the loved ones in your life. You know, letters from your heart, I think they provide the perfect place to share your personal thoughts with all the special people in your life.